This is Set Him Free, Chapter 12. The door bursting open in the middle of the night wasn't a surprise to Roman, though he couldn't say he welcomed it. Not that it mattered. He hadn't really been able to sleep lately. There were too many thoughts racing through his mind, and trying to quiet them just felt like a lost opportunity. Most were hopeless, but Roman favored them over complete silence. The sky hadn't even begun to brighten, its pitch-black atmosphere still pooling into the windows. A creative choice, coming to bother him when the sun hadn't even passed the horizon. Through the shuffling, Rowan caught a glimpse of green fabric. Only one person in the cottage wore green. "Oh, Roman! Look what I found while I was out," Remus grinned, holding up something unidentifiable in the dark. Roman glared at Remus, whose smile only widened. "Well, I guess someone's not a morning person then. No matter, I'll just give this to you now." Something landed in Roman's lap. Cautiously, he picked it up, his fingers brushing across parchment. There was a flare of light, and for a moment Roman feared that Remus was about to commit arson. Instead, he lit the wicks of several candles around the room, bathing the walls in an orange glow. Roman unrolled the scroll of paper, his breath catching in his throat. It was a missing persons announcement, though this one held his name in large inked letters. So the whole kingdom finally knew. He should have been happy to see this, happy to know that others were searching for him. Instead, he felt his stomach pooling with dread. His mother must have been desperate if she had allowed this to be pasted through the streets. With this, their kingdom revealed a weakness that other territories could take advantage of. "You haven't even got to the best part," Remus chirped, as if he had been able to read Roman's thoughts. "Keep reading." Roman's gaze slipped past his name, and he trailed to the smaller writing just below. It looked as if it had been scribbled on as a last-minute addition, and the prince had to squint to understand the letters. "Please, come back, Roman." It was his mother's handwriting. He knew instantly from the swirl of the S. Why would she be pleading for him to return, though? Janus was supposed to tell him what happened. He had said... Roman sucked in a breath. He had been played for a fool. "It's a shame, isn't it?" Remus circled Roman, humming horribly off-key. "Poor Queenie is worried sick, and she doesn't even know the full truth. She's even so desperate as to write to you in hopes you would see her message. I guess it's a good thing I found this then, huh?" "You sick villain," he choked out. The walls were closing in, everything pushing closer, tighter. Roman couldn't breathe. Remus laughed. "That's not a very nice way to talk to a friend. I'll forgive you, though, especially since you've already got plenty to think about." He pranced out the door, having the audacity to close it silently for once. The poster weighed heavily in Roman's hands as he was flooded with a whole new longing for home. He fiddled with the corner, bringing his eyes away from the ink on the page. He didn't want to see his mother's words, so filled with blame he couldn't stand to face it. Roman could only imagine what Janus had sent to the castle. Fury filled his veins. How could he have been so ignorant? He crumpled the paper in his hands, twisting the letters into a crinkled jumble. At least then he wouldn't have to think about the castle, about Logan and Patton and the Queen. But as the wrinkled corners of the paper brushed past his fingers, he found himself gaining an idea. Roman strained forward, his fingers looping around the handle of one of the candle dishes. Carefully, he pinched at the wick, sending a wisp of smoke into the air with the extinguishing of the candle. As the wick cooled, Roman unfolded the paper and pressed it flat against the floor. He flipped it over, both so that he had plenty of space to work, and so that he wouldn't have to encounter the Queen's pleading words again. The candle soon cooled, cream wax no longer dripping onto the floor. Rowan removed the wick, crushing the charred twine into a fine dust. The sun was beginning to peek in through the windows. He needed to work faster. With frantic lines, he dragged the ash across the page, slowly forming a jumble of sentences. Remus's cackling had echoed through the halls at an ungodly hour, leaving Virgil wide awake. The click of iron a few doors down confirmed what had caused the laughing. A part of him wanted to investigate, yet his mind begged him to ignore it and check in the morning. Virgil settled on getting a few more hours of sleep before witnessing whatever chaos Remus had brought about. He had not expected to enter the room, only to see the prince covered in ash. "What are you doing?" Roman's head snapped up, and he quickly swept something into the corner. They locked eyes. Soot covered Roman's cheeks and the tips of his fingers, various smudges occupying the floor as well. Roman's eyes darted back and forth, but he did not offer an explanation. Virgil spared a glance towards the corner, and the prince immediately stiffened. Slowly, he walked over, picking the paper out of the shadows. Smudged fingerprints covered the page, almost concealing the messy writing. Virgil had to squint to make sense of the words. A plea to the Queen, asking for assistance. An explanation to the messenger, and someone else Virgil was not quite sure of, describing what had happened, and an apology to the three of them. It didn't take long for Virgil to deduce why Roman had been so quick to hide it. "Let them tell me what happened, please," Roman said, his hand half outstretched towards the paper. "Janus already did that. You have no need to repeat it." "What he did was spin a wicked lie," Roman spat. "I want them to know the real truth." "And what's to stop you from telling them everything?" Virgil's eyes narrowed. "You saw what I wrote. I wasn't going to be specific, but I can't leave them in the dark like this." Something flared within Virgil's mind. Sympathy, maybe. Whatever it was left him almost wanting to help the prince, and he shoved the feeling away instantly. The flickering of the nearby candles caught his eye, and he found himself reaching for the flame, letter in hand. Roman paled. "Don't!" The corner of the page caught ablaze, and it only took seconds for the parchment to be turned into cinders. Virgil let them cascade to the floor, choosing to focus on their slow descent rather than meeting the eyes of the prince. Roman had long since gone quiet, an indignant expression resting on his features. "I'm sorry," Virgil muttered. "No, you're not. Not when you get to roam free, as long as I'm tethered to this miserable device." Roman yanked on the chain, a metallic rattle surfacing from the motion. "I was trying to show you some compassion, and all you do is throw the blame back on me. You kidnapped me in the first place. I didn't choose this, Princey. Trust me, if I were the one to decide, you would be as far from my sights as possible." Roman crossed his arms, sighing. "Why do you associate with the others, then? Tell me, why listen to Janus when you end up worse off in the end?" "I'm not worse off," Virgil started, but hesitated. He thought back to his mornings as a thief, all the injuries from running just to get a few brass nails, the close calls to capture, having to negotiate just to make it out of a life in the dungeons. Even now, having to throw away his adventures in the town to assist Janus's scheme. It did feel to be a little much sometimes. Virgil shook his head. He was being ridiculous. That night in the rain, he'd been so young, so weak, and Janus had helped him, saved him even. He had taken him in, given him shelter, food, and protection, when not even his own parents wanted him. It was silly to doubt the inventor, not when they had protected each other for so long. Yet Virgil still wondered if things had changed since then. There seemed to be more pressure than there used to be. You don't have to be like them, you know. Roman met the thief's eyes. I know you can be good. I've seen it before. That morning with your cloak and the gears, you didn't have to return what you had stolen. Virgil looked to the floor. You're wrong. I don't believe I am, Virgil. Please, the kingdom is in shambles. You have to let me go. I can't do that. Not unless you stop protecting the monarchy's secrets. They're not going to release me anyways. It doesn't matter if I told you or not. There's too much for you to lose now. I don't believe you, Virgil said, but that was only half true. Roman's head bowed, and he fiddled with the chain links. Think what you want. You can only deny it for so long. The prince was wrong, Virgil decided. Janus would never do something like that. They were doing this for the good of their lands, nothing more. Roman had to be lying, trying to get into his head like he always had. Virgil hated to admit that it might have been working. He left the room, needing to clear his head. Janus's study was only a few doors down the hall, and he found himself missing the inventor. The scent of metal filled his nostrils before he had even stepped inside, and there were gears scattered throughout the floor. A new invention, Virgil assumed. He hadn't been in the room for days. The space had been filled with papers and creations, all without his noticing. There, at the center of the clutter, sat Janus, humming as he fiddled with the hands of a small clock, not even turning as he addressed the thief. It's been a while since we've last talked, hasn't it? It has. Virgil fidgeted with the hem of his cloak. I have something I need to ask you. Janus turned. Oh? And what would that be? Roman, I mean, the prince? We'll let him go, eventually, right? A strange question coming from you, Janus muttered, twisting a screw into place. Is there a reason for such an inquiry? Virgil twisted his cloak tight around his fingers. Just wondering. Janus raised a brow, clearly unconvinced. I'm serious, Jan! The inventor sighed. As of now, the prince will never return to the castle. But what if he finally speaks up? We have gone far past negotiations, Virgil. Guards are lining the streets, and the queen is on high alert. If we were to set him free, there is no doubt he would charge us instantly. It's too dangerous. Virgil flinched as Janus set a hand on his shoulder. It's a difficult concept to grasp, I know, but we've known this from day one. No, Virgil wanted to scream. He hadn't. All he had wanted to do was survive, to avoid getting arrested, and to make it to the next day. Now, Roman, the one who was set to bring him into custody, was the only thing keeping him out of it. Virgil should have found the irony amusing, though it left him feeling sick to his stomach. Janus must have noticed his ongoing silence, because Virgil felt the hand on his shoulder squeeze just a little tighter. Everything will be all right, Virgil. Maybe this way, the monarchy will finally realize their faults. We're just helping to build a better world, right? Right. By lying and stealing, Virgil thought, but did not say. Janus offered a reassuring smile. You and me? Against the world, Virgil finished, ending in a glance that didn't quite meet the inventor's eyes. As soon as Janus turned back to his work, Virgil strode to his room. He fished a sheet of paper and pencil from under his bed, scribbling everything down before he could get cold feet. He was going to regret doing this. He was sure of it. But things were growing worse by the minute. Doing nothing would only increase his concern, and he wasn't going to be the one in the dark this time. Silently, he slipped out of the cottage, the moon illuminating his path into the city. Later that night, Patton would come to his desk to find an unsigned letter. This one would appear much more rushed, only containing one sentence. The first letter is a lie. Roman has been kidnapped. I can't say any more. Virgil didn't yet know if he regretted sharing such things. This has been Chapter 12 of Set Him Free. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time for Chapter 13.